and that more violence is likely to follow.
Okay, thank you very much for the latest there from Beirut. Hugo Bashega, our correspondent there. Well, let's take you to Tel Aviv. I'm joined now by Miri, a former Israel Defense Forces intelligence officer and director of the International Institute for Counter-Terrorism at Reichman University. Welcome to BBC News. First of all, we've been hearing about those raids on Tel Aviv. We've just had a bit more detail. Have you seen or heard anything yourself this morning?
So I was caught by the air raid inside my house. Right now I'm where I stand in front of the TV. If there's another air raid, I won't be able to stay here, because what we do in Israel is you stop your car, you get out, you lay down. They're very clear instructions. Part of what happened and part of the pictures that they're showing was literally a few blocks away from me where I was in my safe room. I clearly heard both the boom and then the following up booms. Part of what's happening in Israel is that Israelis over 11 and a half months, and for years, know how to act. We have that early siren, and then we have the interceptors, and we also act by going into the safe areas that have been built up front. So yeah, we heard this and lived through this one just over the last half hour.
Okay, well, Miri, do of course stay safe, and if you hear any more sounds, then feel free to, of course, stop.
You'll hear the siren if it starts. Okay. It'll come through.
All right. Well, we'll continue on. I wanted to ask you about these comments that we've just heard from an Israeli security official saying that at the moment there have been no clashes and between Hezbollah and the IDF, and that they're describing them as local raids, are very limited and in scope. Do you believe that they can remain limited?
So let's take that apart for a moment. That's exactly the challenge of what Hezbollah is. They are an army, but they're a terror army. They're not an army that comes out openly, tries to do different things, give early warning in the way that Israel does. No, they're a terror army. They're embedded inside the towns, the villages, and underground. So I do expect there to be clashes when the Israeli troops arrive at where they physically are. But right now, what Hezbollah is trying to do, those Radwan forces, those terror fighters that have lots of experience, is to draw Israel into booby traps and traps that they have built up front, just like Hamas in the Gaza Strip, in urban areas. So I do expect more direct clashes, but right now it's Israel taking advantage of the topography to be in better positions to be able to specifically target the different Radwan strongholds.
And we're just hearing, actually, on the Reuters news agency, Miri, I'm just reading it to you now, that Hezbollah says that it used a new missile, a Fadi-4, in its attack on Tel Aviv, where you are. I wonder if you're familiar with a Fadi-4. I'm certainly not.
So what they have are all Iranian-made missiles. They have different names: Fadi-1, Fadi-2, Fadi-3, Fadi-4, and they did not start using the 2, 3, and this is the first time they've said they've used the 4 until this stage of fighting. And in that sense, that says it all. For 11 months, they were attacking us with the short range. And only in the last 2 weeks, when Israel started to try to attack the mid and long range that they were holding in, have they started using them at all. And the Fadi, in that sense, is one that's supposed to be to 350 kilometers with a very heavy payload. And these are missiles that go 300-400 kilometers in a very short time period, all of them supplied by Iran. And that's part of the challenge that we face right now, is both forces on the ground, like the Radwan forces, that want to come in. They had a whole plan, as Hugo mentioned before, to come in to attack what they called Operation Liberation of Galilee. And they want to kidnap people like Hamas did and go back into Lebanon. And then there's that second stage. When Israel responds, then suddenly Hezbollah is the defender of Lebanon against the Israeli aggression. Those are Hezbollah's words. But Hezbollah has been attacking Israel for 11 and a half months from October 8th.
And Miri, I just wanted to ask you about what you think comes next. I mean, there are, concerns about civilian casualties and all of this, humanitarian crisis looming on the ground in Lebanon as well. Israel says this is a targeted operation, but we are already hearing, for example, that a building in a Palestinian refugee camp near Sidon was hit.
So my heart goes out always to mothers, to children, to civilians, to the uninvolved. That's where my heart is. And I'm asking you and all of us, So what we're doing is we're showing the blueprint of the safe haven for those terror elements. That's what Hamas did in the Gaza Strip. And I say it very sadly. This is not something that makes me happy. I think that Israel for the last 11 months has shown enormous restraint over the fact that Hezbollah fired 8,000 rockets before the last 2 weeks. And it was reported very little in the news that I don't have 70,000 friends, but I have friends, and there are 70,000 Israelis who moved from their homes 8 months ago. They're not settlements. This isn't the occupied territory. This is in Israel because Hezbollah was targeting them. All civilians should always be safe. We never target civilians. And I say that the sad aspect is that those terrorists put themselves on purpose as part of their defense there. So we try to be as targeted as we can. It's not an argument I like having. My heart goes out to all of those civilians.
Okay, Miri Eisen, as always, it's good to get your insights and thoughts on stories and developments from the Middle East. And of course, do stay safe.
Thank you.
Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.